I never thought betrayal could sound like a gavel hitting wood. My name is Luke Anderson. I'm 36 years old, and I co-founded a renewable energy company worth $40 million with my late father, a company that carried our family name, our sweat, and his legacy. At my father's funeral, I sat frozen in the front pew, hands clasped, while my stepfather, Richard Hale, stood at the podium pretending grief. The rain outside hit the stained glass windows like static, rhythmic, almost cruelly calm as he unfolded a stack of papers and announced a new will. The words barely sank in. As of this document, full control of Anderson Renewables will transfer to Richard Hale. Whispers rippled through the church. I felt the air thin, my pulse slowing, not from shock but from understanding. He'd been planning this. Every handshake, every late-night meeting with my mother after Dad's surgery, all of it had a reason. I didn't speak, not yet. I just watched him walk down the aisle afterward, shaking hands, offering condolences, his tie perfectly knotted, his mask perfectly in place. Then Claire Bennett, our longtime family lawyer, brushed past me and slipped a folded note into my palm. Her hand trembled. Inside it, just 7 words. Meet me after the burial. You'll want to see this. I looked up. Through the rain-streaked glass, Richard posed beside the hearse, one hand on my mother's shoulder, the other clutching the company folder that used to be mine. Cameras flashed. Reporters whispered. He smiled like a man who'd already won. But as I stood there, grief and fury mixing like stormwater in my chest, I remembered something my father once said while teaching me to sign our first contract. Luke, your name is your bond. Never let anyone write it for you. Now, staring at that forged signature on Richard's papers, I whispered to myself, Dad may be gone, but his signature never lied. If that will was fake, I'd burn everything he built on it. Grief is quiet until someone puts a price on it. The mahogany conference table still smelled like my father's cologne, cedar, and faint smoke. It used to comfort me. Now it made me sick. I sat at the end of the table, hands folded, while Richard Hale, my stepfather, leaned back in my father's leather chair like it already belonged to him. He'd swapped his funeral black for a navy suit and a smirk that didn't fit the occasion. The lawyer, Claire Bennett, entered quietly. She avoided my eyes, but I caught the smallest no, a signal. Something was off. If you're still here, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. You won't believe what happens after this. Richard cleared his throat, voice polished like a salesman's. As per the amended will of the late Mr. Anderson. He paused just long enough to glance at my mother, Eleanor, who sat beside him with trembling hands. The controlling shares of Anderson Renewables, as well as all intellectual property, are to be transferred to me, effective immediately, for the purpose of protecting company stability during this difficult time. Protecting company stability. That's what he called it. Stealing a dead man's dream. I felt every head in that room turn slightly toward me. Tie from some. Relief from others. The vultures, disguised as board members, were already calculating how to stay on Richard's good side. I stayed silent. My father had taught me that silence unnerves people faster than shouting. Claire's assistant passed around the documents. I skimmed the first page, legal jargon, standard clauses. Then my eyes landed on the signature at the bottom. Thomas L. Anderson. Except, not quite. The loop on the L was wrong. Too heavy. My father's signature was light disciplined. His hand never pressed that hard. Something in my gut tightened. I looked up at Claire. She was staring at the same line. Her pen stopped moving. Richard smiled across the table. Luke, your father trusted me to lead. You're grieving. It's best you take time off and let professionals handle things. My jaw clenched. Professionals like you? He tilted his head, calm, rehearsed. Like family. That word, family, hit harder than anything else. I looked at my mother. Her eyes darted away, fixed on the window. Rain again. It hadn't stopped since the funeral. I wanted to ask her if she knew, if she helped him. But I already knew the answer. We'll ensure your father's vision lives on, Richard added, sliding a folder toward me. Sign these. It'll make the transition smooth. I didn't move. I just looked at the folder, my company's name embossed in silver letters, and then back at him. "Funny thing about signatures," I said. "They tell stories." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Before I could reply, Claire spoke, calm, measured. "Mr. Anderson, perhaps Luke would like some time to review these before signing anything. Legally, he's still a major shareholder until the transfer is completed." Richard's nostrils flared. "The will's clear, Claire. I expect cooperation." She met his stare without flinching. "And I expect authenticity." The room went silent. I slid the papers back across the table and stood. My chair scraped against the wood, echoing in the tension. "If my father really signed this," I said, "then he died a stranger." I walked out before anyone could respond. Outside, thunder cracked through the sky like applause from the universe itself. When I reached the lobby, my phone buzzed. A message from Claire. "Meet me tonight, alone. 9 p.m., my office." I typed only one reply, "Bring the original copy." If the ink on that will was fake, then so was every word Richard ever spoke about family. Dead men don't change signatures. The rain hadn't stopped since the funeral. It clung to the glass of Claire's office like it refused to leave. Just like me. She was already there when I arrived, sleeves rolled, hair tied back, a single desk lamp painting half her face in gold and half in shadow. "Lock the door," she said without looking up. I did. My shoes left small wet marks across her hardwood floor. The city outside glowed through the rain, muted and ghostly. She pushed a folder across the desk. "You were right to notice the loop in the L." I sat down, heart steady but heavy. Inside the folder were 2 pages. One, the original signature from my father's 2018 shareholder agreement. The other, the new will. Side by side. Even without her pointing, I saw it. The slant was wrong, the ink too thick, and the timestamp at the bottom was off by 3 hours from the official filing log. Claire leaned forward. "It's not just forged. It's layered. Whoever did this used a mechanical pen overlay on a scanned base. The signature is fake, but registered as verified because Richard's team filed it through a private notary channel." I exhaled through my teeth. "So he planned this while my father was still in the hospital." She nodded. "And if we go public without proof beyond handwriting, he'll bury you in lawsuits before we can breathe." My pulse thudded. "What kind of proof do you need?" "Original ink sample, or someone tied to the forgery. Preferably both." Her tone was calm, clinical, but her eyes, sharp gray, carried something more personal. "Fear." "Claire," I said, lowering my voice, "why are you helping me?" She hesitated. "Because your father once helped me. He funded my law school scholarship. He believed in fairness. I can't watch someone bury that under lies." For the first time that week, I felt something close to gratitude. But behind it came fury, clean, cold, and focused. "So what happens if we find proof?" I asked. "Then Richard faces criminal fraud, falsification, and possibly manslaughter if it's proven he manipulated your father's estate while incapacitated." The words hit like thunder. Manslaughter. Claire closed the folder. "But you have to stay quiet until then. No threats, no confrontations. We need proof, not rage." I looked down at the photocopies again. The ink shimmered faintly under the lamplight, black, bold, and dishonest. I remembered sitting beside my father in this same building years ago, signing our first contract together. He'd patted my shoulder and said, "Your signature means you're proud of your name." Now someone had weaponized his name. I stood up. "Where do we start?" Claire handed me a business card. "The notary's name is Elise Vaughn. She's off the grid. If we find her, we find the truth." I turned the card over in my hand, the embossed letters catching the light. "What if she's already been bought?" I asked. Claire's expression hardened. "Then we make sure she regrets the sale." Outside, thunder rumbled like a warning. I walked to the window, watching the rain blur the city lights into streaks of silver. Richard was somewhere out there right now, probably celebrating his victory. Maybe raising a glass to the man he thought he'd erased. But he didn't erase me, not yet. I looked back at the forged signature, my father's name twisted into a lie, and whispered to the empty room, "You signed my father's death twice." And the second time, I'll be the witness." He sat in my father's chair before the flowers at the grave wilted. 3 days. That's all it took for Richard Hale to turn grief into paperwork. When I pulled into the company parking lot Monday morning, the first thing I noticed was my name. Gone. The brass plate that once read Luke Anderson, co-founder, had been unscrewed from the glass door. In its place, Richard Hale, acting CEO. Inside, the reception looked different too. New security badges, a new receptionist, same fake smile. "Sorry, sir," she said rehearsed. "Your access card's been deactivated. Company directive." Her eyes flicked away, guilt fighting protocol. I didn't blame her. Richard's power didn't come from loyalty, it came from fear. I stood there for a moment, watching the revolving doors spin behind me, each rotation feeling like a slow erasure of everything my father and I built. By noon, my phone buzzed with news alerts. Anderson Renewables rebrands under new leadership. Sources say the late founder's son steps back amid grief and instability. Instability. That word again. A polite way of calling me unfit. I drove home in silence. Even the radio hosts were talking about it. How a family transition can be complex in high-value corporations. Complex, that's how they softened betrayal for the masses. When I reached my apartment, Claire was waiting outside, arms folded, expression sharp. "He's moving faster than I thought," she said. "He's already filed for a full ownership transfer. Claims you voluntarily stepped down." I laughed once, bitter. "Voluntarily?" "He locked me out of my own servers." She sighed. "He's not trying to hide it. He's trying to humiliate you before we can act." She was right. Richard didn't just want control, he wanted a narrative. The grieving son, the unstable heir. The man is too emotional for leadership. By afternoon, my inbox was flooded with polite condolences disguised as corporate distancing. "So sorry for the situation, Luke. Richard assures us operations will continue smoothly." Each email felt like another nail sealing the coffin, only this time it was mine. I opened our company's official social page. The banner photo was gone. My father's quote, "Integrity is the only currency that never devalues," was replaced by Richard's slogan, "Progress through partnership." Partnership. That word had never felt dirtier. I called Claire again. "He's replacing the board. Every loyal member's out." Her voice was calm but clipped. "Then we get smarter. We collect proof while he parades himself. Let him think he's untouchable." She was right. Revenge wasn't about rage, it was about patience. But patience was burning a hole in my chest. That night I drove past the office again. The top-floor lights were on in his office now. Through the glass I could see him pacing, phone pressed to his ear, laughing. My father's chair turned toward the window, his whiskey glass on the desk. I parked across the street and just watched. He gestured animatedly, that same confidence that used to charm investors and deceive my mother. A man who'd never built a damn thing but somehow always owned the room. I pulled out my phone and recorded through the windshield. Not the best footage, but clear enough to see him signing papers while still on the call. Evidence? Maybe. Symbolic? Absolutely. He looked up once, straight toward the glass, maybe sensing he was being watched. He smiled, slow, deliberate. Then he raised his drink in a mock toast toward me. I started the car, pulse steady. If he wanted a war of perception, fine. I'd give him one built on facts, not fury. The next morning, a courier arrived at my door with a thick envelope. Inside, an official notice barring me from the premises, citing emotional interference with ongoing operations. At the bottom, his signature sprawled arrogantly beneath the company letterhead. I stared at it for a long time before whispering to myself, "You forged one Anderson's name already. Let's see how far you can run on another lie." By evening, Richard called. First time since the funeral. His tone was smooth, condescending. "Luke, I hope you're taking time to heal. This transition." "Cut the act," I said. "You think this is over?" He chuckled. "Over? Son, you built this company on my money. Don't forget who owns you now." I paused, voice cold and measured. Not for long. He thought he'd buried me with my father. He didn't know I was already digging him a grave made of evidence. Some allies whisper because truth can't afford volume. The city was still asleep when I reached Claire Bennett's office. The lights were dim, a single lamp flickering against a wall of legal files. She was already at her desk, reading through a stack of papers with the kind of focus that only comes from obsession or guilt. I placed a coffee on her desk. She didn't look up. "You're early," she said. "Couldn't sleep." "Good," she replied. "Neither could I." She finally looked at me, eyes rimmed red but steady. "I found something." She slid a file across the desk. The top page was an affidavit, a notarization stamp from the day of the will's signing. The notary's name, Elise Vaughn, except next to her address in neat pen was a small note. "Relocated. No forwarding information." "Relocated," I repeated. "That's corporate for vanished." Claire nodded. Her business license expired 2 days after the will was filed. No new registration, no taxes, no trail. It's like she disappeared the moment Richard got what he wanted. I leaned back, watching the city through her window. Morning light barely touched the skyline, gray and heavy. So either he paid her off, or buried her under a non-disclosure. Or worse, Claire said quietly. The room went still. For a moment I thought about my father's words again, his lessons about honesty, fairness, and the weight of a name. The irony hit hard. The man who taught me those values was now a ghost in a lie built under his signature. I asked, "Can you trace her? Bank records, address history, anything?" Claire typed rapidly. "Last known location, Seattle. Registered a small notarization business out of an apartment complex on 9th Avenue. But the lease ended last month. No forwarding, no digital footprint. I already checked LinkedIn, social media, and even legal registries. She's gone. Gone or hidden?" She looked up. "Either way, she's the missing piece. If we find her, we expose the forgery." I paced the room. Every part of me wanted to confront Richard, to tear through his smug facade, to watch the panic crack that polished voice. But Claire's warning from before echoed in my head. We need proof, not rage. "We'll go to Seattle," I said. She frowned. "If he catches wind of it, he'll cover his tracks, and maybe hers." "Then we don't let him." Claire hesitated. "You realize this isn't just a corporate fight anymore. It's criminal." "Good," I said. "That means there's a punishment waiting for him." She half smiled, tired but defiant. "I'll start arranging it, quietly." I left her office as the sun began to rise. The city was waking up, unaware that somewhere in its maze of glass towers, a forged signature was worth more than a man's life. At a red light, I checked my phone. News feeds were still spinning headlines about Richard's visionary leadership. Every post was a lie, polished and hollow. Then my screen lit up with a new message. Unknown number, no contact photo. "Stop digging, or you'll end up with your father." I froze, the air leaving my lungs like someone had punched through my chest. The car behind me honked. I didn't move. The words burned into the screen, simple, direct, and ice-cold. I looked around, empty sidewalks, morning haze, shadows too still to trust. Whoever sent it knew where to strike. I typed back nothing, not because I was afraid, but because silence is more terrifying than anger. You threaten a man who's already buried everything once, and he stops fearing the dirt. I dropped the phone on the passenger seat, stared out at the empty street, and whispered to myself, "You want me to stop digging? Then pray I don't find the shovel." The phone buzzed again, same number. This time, just one word. Tick. He wanted to dine with me, maybe to watch me choke. The invitation came in the form of an email, short, polite, and venomous in tone. "Dinner tonight. Let's talk. No lawyers, no drama. Just family." Richard. Family. That word again. The same one he used to justify stealing my company, my name, my peace. I should have ignored it. But men like Richard don't expect you to face them calmly. They feed on avoidance. So I replied with 2 words. 7 p.m. Confirmed. The restaurant was one of those old-money places, dim lighting, quiet jazz, white tablecloths that smelled of power and perfume. He was already seated when I arrived, waving at me like nothing had ever happened. "Luke," he said, standing. "You look tired." "Grief does that to people," I replied. He smiled, pretending to care. "I thought we should clear the air. No need for tension between us." "You mean between the man who built the company and the man who forged the will?" His eyes flickered, just for a second, before the mask returned. Big accusations for a dinner table. I sat down, folded my napkin, and leaned back. "You invited me, Richard. Let's eat your version of peace." The waiter poured us wine, a deep crimson swirl that caught the candlelight like blood in motion. Richard raised his glass. "To family," he said. I didn't move. I just watched the condensation slide down the glass, forming tiny rivers that distorted his reflection. "You know," he continued, "your father always admired my discipline. Said I reminded him of himself in his younger years." "He said the same about hurricanes," I replied. He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Still angry, I see." "No," I said quietly. "Focused." He tilted his head. "On what?" "The truth. It has a habit of surfacing, like oil leaks." That made him pause. For a moment, the waiter's footsteps were the only sound between us. Then Richard smiled again, too wide to be natural. "You've been talking to Claire," he said. I met his gaze. "You've been listening to my calls?" His smirk widened. "You'd be surprised what money buys, even silence." "Silence isn't loyalty," I said. "It's just rented fear." He leaned in, voice low and sharp. "Careful, son. You're grieving. The world is watching how you handle that grief. One misstep, and I'll make sure they remember you as unstable, not wronged." I stared at him, calm, deliberate. "Then let's give them a show worth remembering." He blinked, confused. I smiled, finished my wine, and stood. "Dinner's on you, I assume? You're good at paying for things that aren't yours." Before he could reply, I placed the empty glass down in front of him, my fingerprints smudged next to his. "Keep this," I said. "Something to remember me by." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You'll find out," I said, walking away. The maitre d' tried to stop me for the bill. I waved him off. "He's covering it. Trust me." Outside, the air was colder than before, rain threatening again, city lights reflecting off the pavement like fractured stars. I pulled out my phone and texted Claire. "Got what we need." "Table 14, the Windsor room," she replied instantly. "Fingerprint?" "Crystal clear. Good, I know a lab." I slipped the phone back into my pocket and exhaled. For the first time since the funeral, I didn't feel powerless. I felt dangerous. He was kind of dangerous, which comes with patience and evidence. Behind me, through the window, I could see Richard still seated at the table staring at the half-empty glass like it was mocking him. Maybe he knew. Maybe he didn't. But I knew one thing for certain. He'd just left his prints all over his own downfall. By the time that glass came back from the lab, the man who forged my father's signature would finally have his own, stamped on a police report. Some betrayals wear wedding rings. I hadn't stepped into my mother's house since the funeral. The flowers were gone, but the scent of lilies still lingered, that fake sweetness that tries to cover decay. She was in the living room, sitting under the portrait of my father, pretending to read. Her pearls gleamed perfectly in place, her posture still elegant, but her hands shook when she turned the page. "Luke," she said softly without looking up, "you shouldn't have come unannounced." "You shouldn't have signed away my life's work," I said. The book lowered an inch. Her eyes, sharp, tired, guilty, met mine. "I didn't sign anything." "No," I said, stepping closer. "You just watched." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The silence between us was worse than shouting. I'd come prepared for denial, excuses, even tears, but not for this fragile quiet that sounded like surrender. "He told me it was paperwork for the board," she finally whispered. "Your father wanted him to take care of the transition." I thought. "You thought?" I cut her off. "You saw him working on those papers the week Dad was dying and you didn't ask what they were?" Her eyes filled. "He said it was for the insurance. I didn't want to upset you." I laughed once, hollow. "Upset me? Mom, he forged Dad's signature. He stole everything, and you gave him the pen." She flinched like I'd struck her. "You don't understand what it's like to be alone at my age. Richard was there when I couldn't breathe. I stared at her, disbelief burning behind my ribs. He was there because he was already planning his next move. You think he loved you? He loved what came attached to your last name. She pressed a trembling hand to her forehead. Please don't talk to me like that. Then tell me the truth. Her lip quivered. I walked into his study the night before the funeral. He was printing something. Legal forms, I think. When he saw me, he closed the laptop and said, "Almost done." I didn't ask questions. Why not? She shook her head, eyes glassy. Because I was afraid of the answer. The room felt smaller with every word. The ticking of the grandfather clock filled the silence, steady and cruel. Do you know what Dad used to say about you? I asked quietly. He said you were the only person he never had to question. Her face crumpled. Luke, but I do. If you're still here, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. You won't believe what happens after this. She covered her mouth with her hand, muffling a sob. I almost felt pity, almost. But pity doesn't rebuild what trust destroys. You didn't just lose your husband, Mom, I said, voice low and trembling. You helped bury mine twice. She looked up sharply, eyes red, mascara streaked. That's not fair. Neither was the will. For a long moment she said nothing. Just the sound of rain outside, sliding down the windows like the tears she refused to let fall. Finally she whispered, "He said you'd get yourself in trouble if you kept pushing." He's not wrong, I said. But I'm not the one who should be afraid. I turned toward the door. Behind me, her voice cracked. What are you going to do? Something you never did, I said. Ask questions. When I stepped outside, the air was cold enough to bite. The porch light flickered behind me, her silhouette framed in the window, a woman trapped between regret and fear. I didn't hate her. I just couldn't trust her anymore. I got in the car, started the engine, and looked back one last time. The same house I grew up in, the same walls that once held love, now looked like a museum of denial. She chose silence over truth, and now I was done being quiet for both of us. Everyone has a price, even honesty. We found her 2 hours outside Seattle, in a rundown roadside motel with flickering neon lights and curtains drawn tight. Elise Vaughn, the notary whose name was on my father's forged will, looked nothing like the woman in her license photo. Her hair was shorter now, unevenly cut. Her hands shook when she opened the door, as if she'd been expecting someone else. "Who are you?" she asked, voice small. Claire held up her legal badge. "We're not cops. We just want to talk." Elise hesitated, eyes darting to the parking lot before letting us in. The room smelled like stale coffee and fear. Papers were scattered across a small table, along with half a sandwich and a cheap motel Bible. I sat on the edge of the bed while Claire stayed near the door, calm, professional. "You signed the Carson will," Claire said. "The signature doesn't match. Tell us what happened." Elisa's lip trembled. "You shouldn't be here. If he finds out—" "He already knows," I interrupted. "He's been 2 steps ahead since the funeral. You're the first person who can put him behind bars. So, talk." She looked at me then, not with fear, but with recognition. "You're his son." "I was," I said. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she opened a small drawer and pulled out a folded piece of paper, an old cashier's check, the edges worn and yellowed. "He gave me this," she whispered. $20,000. Said it was a rush job for a confidential corporate transfer. I didn't want to sign. He threatened me." "With what?" Claire asked. "He knew about my brother," she said, voice breaking. "The charges, the bail money. Said if I didn't help him, he'd make sure my brother never saw daylight again." I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay still. The rage wanted to speak, but rage doesn't record evidence. "You still have the check," Claire said carefully. "That's proof of payment. Can you testify?" Elise looked between us, terrified. "If I talk, he'll kill me." "He's already trying," I said quietly. "And he's running out of people to scare." Claire reached into her bag and took out a small audio recorder. She placed it on the table, its red light blinking like a heartbeat. "Just tell the truth," Claire said. "That's all you have to do." Elise took a long, shuddering breath. Then, with shaking hands, she pressed the button and began to speak. How Richard had called her from a private number. How he'd met her in a parking garage, cash in hand, papers in a briefcase. How he'd already printed my father's signature before she arrived. How he'd whispered, "It's already done. You're just here to make it legal." Her voice cracked halfway through, but she kept going. Every word was another nail in his coffin. When it was over, she buried her face in her hands. "What happens now?" she asked. "You disappear," Claire said. "For real this time. We'll handle the rest." Elise nodded, tears streaking down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Mr. Anderson." "Don't be," I said. "You just gave my father back his voice." We left before sunrise. The road was empty, the kind of silence that feels heavier than noise. Claire drove while I held the recorder tight, as if it were the only thing keeping me from falling apart. "This is it," she said. "With this, we can take him down." "If we live long enough to try," I muttered. She gave me a look, half joking, half worried. I didn't answer. When I reached my car later that night, parked outside my apartment, I noticed something strange. A small scrape near the wheel rim, fresh and silver. I brushed my fingers across it, frowning. Then I started the engine. The car rolled forward for about 10 seconds. Then the brake pedal went straight to the floor. Metal screamed. Tires skidded. I yanked the steering wheel, narrowly missing a parked SUV before slamming into the curb. Smoke filled the air. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stumbled out, coughing, and looked under the car. The brake line was cleanly cut. Not frayed, not damaged. Cut. Someone didn't want the truth to reach daylight, but they just made their first mistake. I was still breathing. Revenge is best served notarized. The lab report arrived in a plain envelope. No logo, no return address, just my name typed cleanly across the front. Claire handed it to me with latex gloves and a look that said everything before I even opened it. "Tell me it's in there," I said. She nodded. Page 3. Inside were 12 sheets of legal precision, signature analysis, ink aging, fingerprint residue scans, all cross-referenced with forensic notes. But one line stopped my breath. Result confirmed partial and full fingerprint matches belonging to Richard Calloway. Stepfather. My fingers tightened around the paper. I could almost hear his voice again. Calm, arrogant, fatherly. Big accusations for a dinner table. He'd said that with a smirk, swirling his wine. Now that same glass had given me the key to end him. Claire stood by the window, arms crossed. It's conclusive. He didn't just witness the signing. He handled the fake pages himself. He wrote your father out of his own legacy. I set the papers down carefully, like evidence of a murder. "When can we file?" She exhaled slowly. "We could submit it tomorrow, but there's timing to consider. Once this goes public, he'll weaponize every contact he has, board members, investors, and media. You'll be painted as the angry heir trying to reclaim his fortune." "Let them," I said. "The evidence speaks louder than money." "Not in court," she said flatly. "In court, optics are money." Her words sank in. She was right. The truth wasn't enough. It needed strategy, precision, not rage. I poured a glass of water, staring at the condensation forming on the rim, thinking about all the nights I'd stayed up studying market data while he'd been busy studying manipulation. "Then what's our move?" Claire turned back to me. "We keep the evidence sealed. Submit it on the same day the board votes to renew his position. That way, when the story breaks, he won't have time to recover. We hit him in public and in court simultaneously." "A double strike," I said. "Exactly. Let him smile for the cameras one last time." I couldn't help it. A faint smile pulled at my lips. For once, I didn't feel powerless. I felt like the storm was finally shifting direction. She walked over, lowering her voice. "Luke, you need to understand this will burn everything. The company, your family's name, and our mother's reputation. There's no coming back from it." I met her eyes. "Then we stop pretending there's something left to protect." For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the city outside, the faint echo of life moving forward, oblivious to the war being planned in a quiet office. Claire finally said, "All right, I'll prepare the legal motion. Tomorrow we go to the district attorney's office." I nodded. "And after that?" We let the truth do what you couldn't, hurt him. I walked her out, locking the door behind her. For a few seconds, I just stood there, the silence too heavy, too calm. Then I placed the report in my safe, right next to the recorder with Elisa's confession and the flash drive of Richard's fake will. 3 pieces of truth, 3 weapons. I thought about my father, about his voice, his discipline, his belief that justice was a matter of patience. If you want to expose a liar, son, give him enough rope. He'll build the gallows himself. That night I opened my laptop to check the news. Nothing yet. The world still thought Richard Calloway was a visionary, a philanthropist, a man worth trusting. Not for long. My phone buzzes with a message from Claire. DA's office ready for filing at 10 a.m. Be there early. I typed back, wouldn't miss it. Before I could close the laptop, another notification popped up. Not from Claire. An email. Subject: cease and desist. Immediate action required. From Richards and Hunt, LLP. Legal representation, Calloway Holdings. My stomach dropped. I opened it. To Mr. Luke Anderson, you are hereby instructed to cease any and all defamatory activity or dissemination of confidential company material. Continued interference will result in civil and criminal action. Attached were screenshots of my name in internal emails, Claire's signature on inquiry requests, and one blurred photo of me outside the notary's motel. He knew. He'd been watching us. The timestamp on the photo? 2 hours ago. By the time the sun rose, Richard's lawyers weren't just defending him, they were hunting me. Secrets hate daylight. By morning, Richard's cease and desist was the least of my problems. The man didn't just want silence. He wanted control, and control had always been his favorite language. So I spoke back in a language he couldn't silence. Exposure. I called Ryan Keller, an old college friend turned investigative journalist. Ryan wasn't a gossip writer. He was the kind of reporter who liked his stories clean, sourced, and sharp enough to wound reputations. He answered on the second ring. Luke Anderson. Haven't heard that name since you ghosted graduation. I need a favor, I said. One that'll make your front page. There was a pause, curiosity replacing sarcasm. Talk. I sent him a secure link with redacted versions of the lab report, the notary's confession, and the board's internal communications Richard thought he'd buried. You're leaking your stepfather's corporate will, he said, half laughing. That's not just revenge, that's arson. Good, I said. Then light it. Ryan exhaled. If I publish this, it's war. He'll come for me, too. Then make it worth it. He was quiet for a moment. Then the sound of typing. Give me 24 hours. By the next morning, the headline broke across major outlets. Forgery, fortune, and the funeral deal. Inside Calloway's 40-monitor scandal. The article hit like a grenade. Every financial network ran it. Investors flooded Calloway Holdings' hotline. Stock plummeted 6% by noon. Reporters swarmed outside the company's downtown tower. And Richard, the man who used to smile like he owned oxygen, was suddenly gasping for air. I watched it unfold from my apartment, the morning sunlight slicing through the blinds, washing the chaos in gold. Claire called within the hour. You leaked it, didn't you? I didn't leak anything, I said evenly. Truth just found a microphone. Luke, she sighed, this could compromise the case. No, I said. It accelerates it. There was silence on the other end, the kind that carries reluctant agreement. By afternoon, Richard went live on a national broadcast. He looked impeccable. Navy suit, silver tie, fake humility dripping from every word. I'm heartbroken, he began, that during a time of mourning, someone would attempt to tarnish my late business partner's legacy and my family's integrity. My mother sat beside him. Pale, perfectly dressed, eyes hollow. He gestured to her, voice trembling with choreographed emotion. Grief makes people vulnerable. My stepson has been under immense stress, and while I understand his pain, these claims are baseless. I wanted to put my fist through the TV. Claire muted the screen during our call. He's good, she admitted. He's turning pity into armor. Then we strip it off. That night, Ryan texted, they're threatening to sue. Want to go on record? I stared at the message for a long time. Going public meant burning the last bridge I had to my family name, but staying silent meant letting Richard's lie win again. Do it, I typed back. Use my name. The next headline came 12 hours later. Luke Anderson breaks silence. My father built that company on integrity. Richard built it on fraud. The quote spread like wildfire. Every radio host, every podcast, every online panel repeated it. I wasn't invisible anymore, but visibility came with consequences. By evening, my inbox was a battlefield. Hate mail, praise, legal threats, job offers. Claire's warning echoed in my head. Once it's out, there's no going back. Then came the message I didn't expect from an untraceable number. R. You think daylight saves you? You should know better than that. Attached was a photo. My father's original signature, and another document I'd never seen before. Same handwriting, same date, same seal. But this one, granted Richard co-founder status, dated 6 months before my father's death. I forwarded it to Claire immediately. This wasn't in the will package, I said. He's manufacturing new documents. She replied within seconds. Then he's desperate, which means he's close to slipping. I stared at the photo one last time, the signature mocking me in perfect imitation. Richard's voice echoed in my head, cold and amused. If you think you've won, Luke, you haven't seen what I forged next. The truth always leaves a paper trail. By now, sleep had become a luxury I couldn't afford. My nights blurred into spreadsheets, legal files, and the low hum of paranoia. Every creak outside my apartment door sounded like Richard's shadow. Every vibration of my phone felt like another warning. Claire called me at 3:17 a.m. Her voice was steady, but beneath it, there was that rare note of triumph. Luke, you need to see this. When I arrived at her office, the place was lit only by her desk lamp and the blue glow of a single monitor. A coffee mug sat untouched beside a folder stamped Confidential First State Financial Holdings. She didn't waste time. These are your father's corporate accounts, she said. And these, she pointed to a column of transfers, belong to Richard's personal investment trust. What am I looking at? Wire movements, she said. 5 transactions. 2 days before the funeral. Millions siphoned from Carson & Sons reserve fund into his Cayman shell company. I stared at the dates, my pulse slowing into something heavier than rage. He started stealing before the eulogy was over. No, Claire corrected, her voice tightening. Before the coffin was even lowered. She clicked open another file. Authorization forms with both Richard's and my father's signatures. My stomach turned. Those are predated, she explained. Filed to look like your father approved the transfers. But the metadata shows they were created on the morning of his death. My jaw clenched. So he forged those too. Yes, but this time it's different. These weren't just theft. This proves premeditation. Financial crimes before the will even went public. That's prison time, Luke. She leaned back, exhausted but alive with conviction. We've got him. For a moment, I didn't speak. The numbers on the screen weren't just digits. They were timestamps of betrayal. Each one is a silent confession in code. I remembered my father's old saying, if you want to find a liar, follow where his money sleeps. And Richard's money wasn't sleeping. It was running. How clean is the evidence? I asked. Digital copy, verified logs, and bank-certified timestamps, Claire said. It's airtight. Then why do you sound nervous? She sighed, rubbing her temples. Because the more airtight our case gets, the more desperate he'll become. And desperate men don't fight fair. The weight of her words sat between us like a loaded gun. I knew she was right. Richard wasn't the kind of man who surrendered to truth. He bought it, bent it, or buried it. Still, for the first time, since the funeral I felt a shift, hope exactly, but something sharper, a sense that the storm was turning in my direction. So, what's next? I asked. Claire smiled faintly. We don't expose him yet. We make him expose himself. How? We bait him, she said. If he thinks someone inside his circle is leaking information, he'll move fast and make mistakes. You want his confession? We corner him into giving it. I studied her, impressed and a little afraid. You sound like someone who's done this before. Once, she said quietly, and the man I trapped never saw daylight again. The room went silent except for the rain against the window. Relentless, cleansing, familiar. I walked closer to the monitor, tracing the date of the first transfer with my eyes. June 11th, I murmured. The day before my father died? Exactly, Claire said. He moved the money before he even announced the will. That's intent, and intent wins trials. I turned toward her, something cold but certain forming in my chest. Then, it's time he learns what intent feels like. She met my gaze, that lawyer's precision cutting through her exhaustion. We've got him, Luke, she whispered. But let's make him confess. And when he does, I said, staring out at the dark skyline, I want him to realize too late that the paper trail ends with his name. The man who stole my legacy sat where my father once prayed. The morning of the board meeting, the city felt unnaturally calm. Sunlight glinted off the mirrored towers downtown, too bright, too clean, like the world had no idea Justice was about to walk in wearing an expensive suit. Claire stood beside me in the elevator, her posture straight, her eyes steady. "You're sure about this?" she asked. "If I wait any longer," I said, "he wins by silence." The elevator chimed. 28th floor. The boardroom. Through. The glass walls, I saw them, the board members, immaculate in their tailored arrogance. Cameras lined the back wall for the company's live investor broadcast. And at the head of the long mahogany table sat Richard Calloway, my stepfather. My father's ghost has with better posture. He looked up as I entered, that same patronizing smile carved across his face. "Luke," he said warmly, standing. "I wasn't sure you'd show." "Wouldn't miss it," I said. He gestured toward the seat on his right, my father's old chair. "Please." I sat, the leather cold against my palms. Claire stood behind me, silent, blending into the room like a shadow with a law degree. Richard began the meeting with his usual sermon, talking about stability, market confidence, and our shared vision for the future. Every word was polished, deceitful, rehearsed. Then came his favorite part, humiliation. "Before we move to agenda items," he said smoothly, "I'd like to address recent slander in the press, false claims about my handling of the estate." He looked directly at me. Family disputes are tragic, especially when grief clouds judgment. But I assure everyone here, my conscience and my record are clear. The room hummed with polite nods. He was performing, the misunderstood patriarch, the steady hand. I waited until he finished, then slowly stood. "If your conscience is clean," I said, "you won't mind a short presentation." He frowned. "Excuse me?" I picked up the remote from the table. The projector screen flickered to life. Behind me, Claire moved to the laptop, her fingers flying over the keys. Slide 1, my father's original signature, dated 3 years ago. Slide 2, the fake will. Overlaid, the signatures lined up, identical. 2 identical. A whisper rippled through the room. "What is this?" Richard demanded. "Proof," I said evenly, "that the man sitting in that chair forged his partner's name, stole $40 million, and rewrote a man's death into profit." His jaw tightened. "You have no right." "Oh, I have every right," I interrupted. "You signed it." Slide 3 fingerprint reports. His name, his prints, his guilt. Claire clicked on the next file. The bank logs. Millions transferred into a Cayman account before my father's funeral. Timestamps glowing like scars. The boardroom fell silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. "These," Claire said calmly, "are confirmed by First State Financial Holdings. pre-authorized transfers using falsified signatures. The metadata is time-stamped at 7:43 a.m., the morning of Mr. Carson's death. Richard's voice cracked when he finally spoke. "You can't prove—" The door opened, every head turned as two men in dark suits entered, badges flashing. "Federal Bureau of Investigation," the taller one announced. "Mr. Richard Calloway, you're under federal investigation for wire fraud, document forgery, and obstruction of justice." The room erupted. Chairs scraped, murmurs exploded, and cameras blinked red with live broadcast recording everything. Richard's face drained of color. He pointed at me, his voice shaking with rage. "You set me up." I met his gaze, steady and calm. "No, Richard," I said. "You set yourself up the moment you touched my father's name." Agents moved in, cuffing him before he could bolt. His cufflinks, gold, engraved with my father's initials, clinked against the table as they took his hands behind his back. He thrashed once, shouting, "You think this fixes anything? You think you've won?" I leaned forward just enough for him to hear me clearly. "No," I said quietly. "Winning isn't the point. Truth is." He went silent, eyes burning as they dragged him out. For a moment, the room just watched, the empire he'd stolen collapsing in real time. Claire turned off the projector and gathered her files, her movements slow, deliberate. She looked at me. "It's done." I shook my head. "Not yet." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "He won't stay quiet. Not while he's cornered." Claire exhaled. "Then we make sure his next move is his last." The city stretched beneath us through the glass, sunlight glinting off the skyline like the world had started over. The elevator doors closed behind Richard and the FBI agents, but his final glare stayed burned in my mind. He kind that promised one thing. He wasn't done yet. The louder he protested, the quieter the room became. The cameras caught everything. The flashbulbs, the shouting, the metal cuffs snapping shut around Richard's wrists. The man who once commanded rooms with his charm now looked small, a titan reduced to static and headlines. Reporters swarmed the marble lobby of Carson & Sons, microphones clashing like swords. "Mr. Calloway, did you falsify the will? Is it true you embezzled company funds? How long have you been under investigation?" Richard's answers were chaos fragments of fury wrapped in denial. "I built this company. You're ruining a man's reputation over lies. That boy, he's not my son. He's a parasite." The louder he shouted, the quieter the crowd became. Every scream, every denial echoed off the glass walls and fell flat. The weight of the truth had finally outgrown his voice. Claire stood beside me, composed, watching it all unfold with the calm of someone who'd already seen the ending. I didn't move. I just watched. Across the lobby, my mother appeared pale, trembling, clutching her purse like it was the last piece of control she had left. When the cameras turned to her, she froze. "Mrs. Calloway, did you know about your husband's fraud?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. The world had already decided for her. Then, suddenly, she staggered, her hand clutching the edge of a column as her knees buckled. I reached her in 3 steps. "Mom!" She didn't faint completely, just folded into me, shaking. Her voice came out cracked and raw. "I thought he was helping. I thought he was saving the family." I held her up, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. "You looked the other way," I said quietly. "You saw him signing papers in secret." Her tears hit my sleeve. "I didn't want to believe it. Not after your father died. I couldn't lose another man." "You didn't lose him, Mom," I said. "He was never yours to keep." For a long moment we just stood there, HR guilt, my anger, the noise of the press muffled behind the pounding in my ears. Then the agents led Richard through the glass doors toward the waiting car. He caught my gaze one last time, defiant, smirking even now. "Enjoy your victory, son," he said. "You just killed your own family name." I didn't respond. Some men didn't deserve answers. Claire touched my arm. It's over. I shook my head. Not over, just finished. As the car door slammed and the convoy pulled away, the reporters shifted focus. Microphones now pointed at me. Mr. Anderson, how do you feel about your stepfather's arrest? What happens to the company now? I looked into the swarm of lenses, their blinking red lights reflecting off my father's name engraved on the building behind them. This company was built on integrity, I said steadily. My father believed that truth is the only inheritance worth fighting for. That's what I'm keeping alive. The cameras clicked, but for once it didn't feel invasive. It felt like closure. My mother stood silently beside me, mascara streaked, face pale, the weight of her silence finally catching up to her. Claire lingered nearby, phone in hand, already fielding calls from prosecutors and the press. I turned away from them all, looking out at the city, the skyline painted in late afternoon gold. The same city that had watched me fall apart at a funeral now stood witness as I began again. For years, Richard built his empire on forged ink and false loyalty. And me? I built mine on truth. Brutal, costly, undeniable truth. He built his empire on forged ink, I said under my breath, watching the convoy disappear. I rebuilt mine on truth. But even as the cameras faded and justice settled, something told me Richard's story wasn't done, and neither was mine. Justice doesn't heal, it cleans. The boardroom smelled different now. Not of whiskey and arrogance, just disinfectant and silence. They'd removed Richard's name from the glass door that morning, but his shadow still lingered on every surface. I stood by the window overlooking downtown Seattle. The skyline was the same, steady, polished, untouchable. The only thing that had changed was me. The press called it a victory. The son who restored his father's legacy. They made it sound like a fairy tale, like the gavel's echo could replace the years stolen by betrayal. But justice doesn't fix you. It just wipes the blood off the floor and leaves you staring at the stains. Claire walked in, a folder under her arm. The board voted unanimously, she said. You're the new CEO. I gave a small nod. Congratulations to us. She smiled faintly. It's what your father wanted. I looked around the room, same one where he'd built everything, the same one where Richard tried to destroy it. The portraits, the polished table, the city reflecting off the glass, all of it looked colder than I remembered. You ever wonder, I said quietly, if winning just means inheriting someone else's ghosts? Claire tilted her head. You earned this, Luke, every inch of it. Maybe, I said, but every inch feels hollow. She walked closer, placing the folder on the table. Company reports, legal documents, and transfer documents. The end of one story, the beginning of another. The FBI's still sorting through the accounts, she said. He's looking at 20 years minimum. Maybe more. He'll appeal, I muttered. Probably. But he won't win. I wanted to believe her. But when you spend years living under someone's manipulation, even victory feels like another one of their traps. The phone on the desk buzzed, messages from journalists, investors, people I didn't know, congratulating me on justice. I ignored them all. I walked to my father's chai, the one Richard had stolen, the one that had seen more lies than meetings. I ran my hand along the armrest, the worn leather cool under my palm. For a second, I saw my father sitting there again, his calm smile, his steady eyes. Then the vision faded, replaced by the ghost of my own reflection. You did it, Claire said softly behind me. Yeah, I whispered, and I thought it would feel better. She paused, studying me. You're not angry anymore. No, I said, just tired. We stood there in silence for a while, two people surrounded by the ruins of justice. The city lights flickered through the glass, throwing gold across the table like fragments of something once pure. Finally, she spoke again, voice low and deliberate. You didn't win for him, she said. You won for yourself. I turned to her, and for the first time in weeks I almost smiled. Maybe she was right. Maybe justice wasn't about honoring the dead. Maybe it was about letting the living breathe again. Outside, rain began to fall. Aught heavy, not violent, just steady. The kind that washed rather than destroyed. I took one last look at the empty chair and whispered, Rest easy, Dad. It's over. But deep down, I knew something she didn't. Justice doesn't erase pain. It only makes room for what comes next. Even forgiveness has an address. The prison looked nothing like I imagined. No darkness, no drama, just gray walls, dull light, and time itself pacing in circles. Claire didn't come this time. She offered to, but I told her no. Some ghosts you have to meet alone. The guard led me down a corridor that smelled of bleach and regret. My footsteps echoed against the concrete until we stopped at a metal door with a small glass window. Inside sat Richard Calloway, thinner, older, and stripped of everything except his pride. His orange uniform looked too clean for the man who once wore $1,000 suits. He looked up as I entered, eyes flickering with something between shame and calculation. "Luke," he said, "you actually came." "You asked," I replied. He smiled faintly, like we were just two businessmen closing another deal. "I didn't think you'd want to see me again." "I didn't," I said, sitting across from him. But I needed to. The room was silent except for the faint buzz of the ceiling light. Richard leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You won, son. Congratulations." "I didn't come for congratulations." He smirked. "Then what? Closure? Forgiveness?" I met his eyes. Clarity. He laughed, the same hollow, echoing sound that once filled our house. "You really think you're any different than me? You took the same company, the same clients. You just wore cleaner gloves." "No," I said quietly. "I built it without lies." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, not regret, but exhaustion. "Your father was too trusting," he muttered. "He didn't understand the world we live in. I did what I had to do to protect what was ours." "You mean what was his?" I corrected. "You didn't protect it. You poisoned it." Richard's jaw tightened. He leaned back, sighing. "You think this makes you righteous? Wait until you've spent 30 years running something built on expectation. It eats you alive." "Then you should have stopped eating," I said. The guard at the far end shifted, probably used to conversations like this. Men trying to rewrite the past with words. Richard lowered his gaze. For the first time, he looked smaller than the crime he committed. "Luke," he said, voice softer now. "I lost everything. Your mother won't speak to me. The company's gone. I wanted you to know I never meant to destroy you." I stood. Slowly. Calmly. "You didn't destroy me," I said. "You forced me to rebuild." He looked up, confusion in his eyes. "So what now? You gloat? Walk away the hero?" I shook my head. "No, heroes save people. I just stopped letting you ruin mine." He tried to speak again, but I cut him off. "You forged a signature," I said, steady, deliberate. "I forged a life without you." Silence. Just the hum of fluorescent lights and the quiet sound of truth landing where lies used to live. Richard didn't respond. His shoulders sank, his eyes falling to the table. A man finally realizing that the one thing he could never counterfeit was peace. I turned to leave. At the door, the guard nodded once. I didn't look back. Outside, the air felt heavier, hot with pain, but with release. For years, I thought justice would feel like fire. But walking out of that place, it felt more like rain. The past was behind bars now. But the future was entirely mine to write. Peace isn't quiet. It's earned. 6 months later, the name on the building changed again for the last time. The morning the new sign went up, I stood across the street, coffee in hand, watching the workers replace the cold corporate logo Richard had designed with the one that had built this company from the ground up. Anderson & Co. My father's name. The real one. The one Richard erased with ink but could never erase from truth. The crowd below didn't know the history. They just clapped politely as the tarp fell and gold letters caught the sunlight. But for me, it wasn't about applause. It was about closure. Inside, the office looked different, no brighter. Not in design, but in energy. We stripped the walls of every trace of Richard's legacy. No portraits, no glass trophies, no self-congratulation. Just clean walls and quiet purpose. Claire had taken a corner office she didn't want. She still said titles made her itch. But she stayed, not as a lawyer this time, but as a partner. "You've built something worth keeping," she told me that morning. "No," I said. I rebuilt something worth believing in. We sat together in the new boardroom, smaller than the old one, less marble and more meaning. The first meeting wasn't about profit or strategy. It was about purpose. I looked around at my team. People who'd stayed when things fell apart. People who believed integrity was a strategy, not a slogan. "We'll keep the business running the same way," I said. "But starting next quarter, 10% of our profits go to a scholarship fund." Claire raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For whistleblowers," I said. "People who risk everything to tell the truth." The room went silent. Then someone started to clap. Slowly. Then the rest followed. But I didn't need their applause either. That fund wasn't a charity. It was redemption. For every person silenced by fear, every truth buried under money, every forged signature that ever rewrote someone's life. Later that day, I walked into my father's old office. The same desk. The same view, except this time it felt right. I opened the top drawer and took out his old pen, the one he used to sign every contract, every deal, every letter. It was heavy in my hand, smooth from years of use. I uncapped it slowly and signed the first check to the fund in his name. He took my signature once, I whispered, looking at the ink dry across the page. Now my name signs everything he ever wanted. I leaned back, staring at the city, the skyline painted gold by evening light, the hum of life below. No cameras, no applause, no ghosts, just peace. And peace, I realized, wasn't silence. It was the sound of breathing without bitterness. I placed the pen on the desk, right where my father used to keep it, and turned off the light. Outside, Claire was waiting by the door. "Ready?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, smiling for the first time in a long time. "Let's go home." We walked out together, no headlines, no flashbulbs. Just quiet dignity. Because the story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rebuilding what the truth deserved. He took my signature once. Now my name signs everything he ever wanted. Subscribe for more stories of truth and justice.